In these uncharted waters, sometimes a bit of clarity is necessary to look at the whole picture. Or is it that the painter doesn't want us to see the whole meaning?
Sometimes a piece of the puzzle is missing, and it is through seeking that missing piece that we are able to find clarity.
With the muddy swamp that surrounds Washington, it is time we start to see through the mud and seek clarity first.
It is going to be through the current and future generation of college kids that we are able to clean this mud up to truly see what is going on in our politics.
To those who take up the charge to defend liberty, they need someone to defend theirs. This is your Collegiate Defense, an official podcast of the American Conservative Youth Union. Good evening and welcome to your Collegiate Defense. I'm Aidan C. Haggard.
And I'm James Laurence, and today we will be talking about the vice presidential pick of Donald Trump.
As many of you know, Trump picked Ohio Senator J.D. Vance on July 15, 2024, saying, quote, on his social media, and I quote, after lengthy deliberation and thought, and considering the tremendous talents of many others, I have decided that the person best suited to assume the position of Vice President of the United States is Senator J.D. Vance of the great state of Ohio. And so this is something that is kind of almost not foreseen. Obviously, we knew that we were kind of hinting towards him, but it's not typically what you would want to do when you're choosing a vice presidential candidate. Not that it's the wrong choice, it's just not the typical textbook definition of the best choice.
Normally, when you see a candidate pick their vice president, it is to gain votes in some way or appeal to a certain community that they don't do well with. And I've heard the Trump campaign and other people say that the reason he picked J.D. Vance was to reach the Midwest and to help win Ohio. But Ohio seems to be a pretty strong red state, and I don't think it would shift. So I question, this pick of, was it truly to appeal to Ohio, and what other Midwest states would J.D. Vance do well in?
Yeah, historically, when you're looking at a vice presidential candidate, take for instance the 2016 election and 2020, when we had Mike Pence, the reason why he was chosen is because you want to have a vice president that attracts something that you are lacking in. When it comes to Mike Pence, what we saw was that Trump was lacking in some aspect or another, certain moral values, certain Christian values, and that's where Mike Pence played a role in, because he was able to attract that. And then also he was able to once again win part of that Midwest
Indiana,
region.
yeah.
In the Indiana region, which is relatively a swing state, but it's sort of
Indiana differs.
It kind of differs. It's not solidified red, but it's pretty red overall. But when we look at the state of Ohio, I mean, over the last couple decades, over the last half century, really, Ohio has really voted for almost the winning candidate every single time. And so we think of Ohio as a very Republican state, but I mean, when we look at when Obama ran, Ohio went blue for Obama. When we look at Clinton, we went blue for Clinton.
Wow.
We have followed the winning streak every single time except 2020, where we supported Donald Trump instead of Joe Biden. And so we kind of have that historical preface and context of doing that. Now, that's not always the case, because when we look at like 1908 to like 1856, 100% Republican. That 50 years right there were all Republican, except with, like, I guess there was a single vote going for Cleveland in 1892.
Electoral vote?
Yes,
okay.
A single electoral vote. And so historically, in that time, it was very, very red. Now, in our own hometown here in Medina County, we have not voted for a Democrat at the presidential level since the Great Depression. And that kind of goes to show there. In the state of Ohio, in those 3 election cycles, Roosevelt was chosen. Eventually, we kind of got a little tired of Roosevelt, and we voted for, Dewey.
Yeah.
And of course, he did not win. And then after that, we supported Truman, which was the incumbent. So once again, we have this history of supporting the incumbent: Eisenhower, Truman, Nixon. We were a big person there. It looks like we did support Johnson in '64 once again. We supported Johnson, which kind of goes into a similar circumstances. We're going to talk about this at another time. is very parallel
Yeah,
of
the
the
parallels of the 1968 election with modern day.
with modern day politics, because when we look at it, we'll kind of just go into this very briefly. We're having a bit of a schism in the Democratic Party. Joe Biden was the incumbent. He was the president, which means that he's the best chance of getting reelected, typically.
Yes.
Obviously, his actions taken as president are not really what you would want to see as favorably. He's decided to drop out, what is it, like 106 days before the election, like 110 days before the election?
It's very close.
Very close to the election, which means that the Democratic Party is now having an issue to rally around a single candidate. Now, we always knew that we were going to have Trump. It was just an obvious choice.
Yeah.
And the electors, they went towards that. The states supported it, and the electors went towards it. It was more of a question who's going to be the vice president, and that's where kind of J.D. Vance plays into it. But Democrats are now in this dilemma that they don't know who their president is going to be. They say now it's going to be Kamala Harris, but is she really, or is she going to be a placeholder? But we know for a fact that we have J.D. Vance and Donald Trump, which gives us that leg up because we know ahead of time. We can plan farther in advance. We have that fundraising that happens. And so we kind of see that the Ohio historically has voted for the winner. In Ohio, but in the most recent times, in the last decade or two, Ohio has voted Republican all the way. So I kind of wonder where J.D. Vance is coming from, what he is attracting. It seems to me quite surprising that he's risen so quickly in politics.
Yeah, he has risen very quickly. I mean, he was elected in 2022 as a senator, where he barely won just because of Trump's endorsement. If Trump doesn't endorse him, I think he loses, or it's a much closer race. He only beat Tim Ryan by like 5 points in that election.
Taxing Tim Ryan. No, I mean, it was not a very far out election. He did not have that comfort of possibly winning that again, which is very interesting because we don't hold the majority in the Senate.
No,
we don't hold the majority in the Senate.
We don't hold the Republicans do not hold the majority in the U.S. Senate, which is very scary because with Trump taking a senator away, yes, that seat most likely would not go blue because we have a Republican governor. I heard a couple other people say this, and I agree with it, that it doesn't make sense to take someone away who's been there for so little, who is making an impact, just so you can have a VP when there's plenty of other good options out there.
Yeah, and so that kind of almost begs the question of who are we going to replace, or rather, who is DeWine going to fill in the replacement, assuming that Trump wins?
Yeah.
You know, because there will be a vacancy we have to fill out. There's 4 or so more years left in the term. And so it kind of, I feel like we would almost be looking towards who ran for the primary for this election. I don't think Frank LaRosa is going to get it. It doesn't make sense. He's still the Secretary of State. It wouldn't make sense to put him in.
No.
I don't think that's the way DeWine goes.
No.
Part of me wants to say that it would be amazing for Vivek Ramaswamy to get put in.
Here's the thing, because I'm a huge Vivek guy, got the hat on, but DeWine wants somebody in there, and he said this in a press conference with, I believe, Fox or NBC at the convention. He wants someone in there that is going to be there for a while, who's going to be effective and is going to work hard. And I think Vivek and a couple other candidates will be effective and will work hard, but I think Vivek wants to go on to bigger things. I think he wants to set himself up for a presidential run in 28 or farther down the road. And I don't think he really wants to be there for a while. So DeWine would appoint somebody, and then when does the term end? 20?
He was elected in 22, so the term ends January of 27.
Yeah. So he would only be in there for 2 years, and then we would have that election. And I think by then Vivek would have a much bigger nation-recognized name, and he would want to move on, like I said earlier. So I don't think that would be the best pick if that's truly what DeWine wants. And I think that is a good thing that we need, is consistency in the Senate. Mm-hmm. You know, if we appoint someone, let's say DeWine points a Matt Dolan, and Matt Dolan serves out the rest of the term and the people don't like him, well, now we're just switching senators every single year, basically. Mm-hmm. And there's no consistency, so it's very hard to get stuff done from the point of Ohio's interest. And so I think we're gonna talk about this more in depth a little bit later, but who does DeWine go with and what is the smartest pick? I kind of want to bring it back to Do you think that Trump made the right pick with J.D. Vance?
Well, who was the other realistic options? Who were the other options?
You had what's his name, Governor of North Dakota. He ran. I can't think of his name now.
Let's look this because it's something of serious, genuine concern. Is
Doug Burgum.
Doug Burgum, which,
Yeah.
to be honest, the fact that it's not coming to our minds is probably evident of the fact that he wasn't too popular. When we look at that, I mean, we also had other candidates, of course, Vivek Ramaswamy.
Marco Rubio.
Marco
was
Rubio.
Up there. I heard Glenn Youngkin's name thrown out a little bit later in the race.
We love Chris Christie. I see him all the time down at McDonald's. I meet him every once in a while, and just no, I don't. I think he was very interesting.
But then we saw people like Dr. Ben Carson and Tim Scott, and I think they would have been. I think Dr. Ben Carson would have been a smart choice because he is very calm and collected, and he makes his point very clear. Where Trump, kind of flies off the rails and doesn't stay on script. So I think Carson would be able to reach that vote that doesn't like Trump as much because he's too much for them.
But I think Vivek kind of also does the same thing.
Oh, yes.
Vivek does the same thing and the same approach that he realizes that he is able to do more if he can simply just slow down the conversation and to speak to them. When you look at how he handles protesters, he lets protesters in because he's not afraid of what he has to say to them. He's not afraid of what they're going to say to him.
There was a clip where there was someone protesting outside, and he went out to him and said, hey, we'll have you come in and you can say what you have to say, and then I'll respond, and we'll have a good open dialogue. And he even just helped him pick all his stuff and gave him a water and helped move it in because he wants to be able to have those open and honest conversations that need to happen to help the country.
Yeah, and of course it's not only selfless. I mean, he obviously wants to show that he is able to, bridge that gap between the left and the right. And oftentimes, I mean, whenever you confront protesters like these, they don't want to have an honest conversation.
Yeah.
They don't want to redress their grievances. They just want to complain. And that is what we've seen today a lot. We see all these people fighting a culture war. And obviously it's necessary to fight for our identity, fight for our culture. But when you have these people only fighting a culture war and not fighting a war in our civics and governance process, not fighting for a cause in the civics and governance process, we see that we have a whole bunch of, I don't want to say useless idiots, but people who are advocating for a cause but not actually, putting pen to paper.
Yeah.
They're not actually, putting a possibility to move forward. They're only creating ideas. Words without actions are completely empty. And so we see that we're able to find that most of these protesters just don't want to have an honest conversation. They want to complain. And I understand. I mean, there's a certain point of me that understands that I have, problems with certain candidates, some in the Republican Party, mostly in the Democratic Party, and I want to complain. But I understand that if I just complain, nobody's going to listen to me. Nobody likes listening to a complainer, And so that is one of these things that he is able to really handle well. And I think that Donald Trump could have really received a lot of good attention having him as his running mate. But there are a couple setbacks. They have strong egos. Would they be able to work together?
Well, to the strong egos point, I think Vance recently in interviews that I've seen and stuff on Capitol Hill, he is more attacking and aggressive. And that's when I heard Vance, I'm like, are their egos going to be able to get along? Like with Vivek, they both have big egos, and I don't know if that's just the new trend in the Republican Party, but I think it could cause some division, and you could end up where Trump is just blaming Vance like how he did to Mike Pence for everything. And I don't think that's something that we want that's healthy and that would help the Republican Party. And that's why I don't think Vance was the best pick. I also think Vance doesn't connect well with younger voters, as some of the other candidates would have. And I know I've heard some people from the Appalachian Mountains and other, you call them hillbillies, say that he's almost like a fake hillbilly. He wrote his book, and now he's just kind of like, yeah, I'm here now. He's not really trying to help them. And I know a couple different people, I've seen clips on YouTube of that, saying that he needs to work on that for them to think he's like a true hillbilly. It was very interesting to hear some people.
Yeah, I mean, some people would make the argument that he is almost like a carpetbagger. He's kind of just, he's going into a situation that he's not exactly 100% a part of. But I think it's very interesting, you know, his origins, where he came from.
Yeah.
You know, you don't typically see an average guy getting into politics. The last, like, most average president was Truman. I mean, he was just like, just a guy, you know, and he was just, he made his way into politics. When he left, he was poor. He wasn't wealthy, but he was a good leader. And so when you realize that, you know, not often do we see average people going into politics, it kind of makes you wonder, is this a breath of fresh air with J.D. Vance? Is he moving too quickly? You know, is he taking too large of steps that might hinder the Republican Party?
Yeah.
And so that's what makes it very interesting. So, you know, if you were to say one person that you would definitively solidify that should have been chosen by Trump, who would you support?
I think I'm going to have to go Vivek.
Yeah.
I think that he would have been there for Trump for every single thing. I think that even on the campaign trail, he was defending Trump. When Colorado took Trump off the ballot, Vivek said, "That's not fair. I'll take my name off the Colorado ballot," basically in protest that Trump's not going to be on there. He also knows the law really well and would be able to defend other attacks while Trump can focus on campaigning and the specific court cases he has going on. And that's why I think that Vivek would be the best choice.
Yeah, and so obviously Vivek's not going to be the choice. He's not.
Yeah.
What place would you put in the cabinet if it was the cabinet, or where would you place him? Because obviously Vivek is a gem. You really want to put him to use. How would you use him if you were Trump in the political sense of the cabinet or any other aspect of appointments?
I don't 100% know, because I haven't. You know, he doesn't have one strong suit that he hits on. He's kind of got a couple strong points. And he says, we're going to shut it down. We're going to shut down all the agencies. I'm like, well, put him in one of those agencies. But his idea is to shut it down, which, you know, I agree with. So I don't think it would make sense to put him there. I don't know if putting him in a place, I don't think education would be smart to put him. I don't know if something like dealing with foreign affairs would be smart, because he does show that America First non-interventionist policy. And so he would be like, you know, is giving aid to Israel in the best interest of America? Is giving aid to Ukraine in the best interest of America? And I think from what I've heard, that would be the best place for him to advise Trump on how we are going to use our money broadly, and really pick out where is it going to help America and where won't it.
Yeah, and one of the concerns that I have with President Trump and a lot of people in general, the newer Republican Party, is that, you know, is he really going to drain the swamp? Has he really drained the swamp? You know, to what effect has he? Because we know in 1988, you know, Bush was like, read my lips, no new taxes, but the taxes increased after that.
Yeah.
You know, are these promises that these politicians are making realistically possible? Are they happening? Are they achieving? That's one of the biggest concerns that I say. He says that he's going to, you know, destroy part of the bureaucracy. He's going to clean out the Department of Justice. But has he proven that he can do that? You know, is this a monster he can tackle?
I mean, in 2016, he ran on, we're going to drain the swamp, we're going to drain the swamp. And he maybe fired 2 or 3 people, and then replaced them with people that he agreed with, which I think most presidents do. But is that truly draining the swamp? Me personally, I don't think so. I think that he could have done a lot more of that, and that he did not live up to that promise. And that's, like you said, many people are worried about that. And I am too. Will he be able to do that again?
Yeah. And so that's one of the general concerns that we have regarding this issue is he going to live up to his promises? And another thing with Vice President pick of J.D. Vance, when Roosevelt, Franklin D. Roosevelt, was running for his last term, the fourth term, Truman was chosen because they knew that Roosevelt was not going to survive that last term. Mm-hmm. With Trump's age being an issue, do you think that we're not electing just a vice president, but the next president of the United States?
It could very well be the next president. And before Biden dropped out, it was a vote for Biden is truly voting for his vice president, and a vote for Trump could very well be a vote for his vice president. Because when you get that high up in age, you don't know when you're going to die, when you're just going to rapidly decline. Mm-hmm. And so I think that the real question voters have to ask themselves is, do you want J.D. Vance to lead the country? If you do, then I think you definitely vote for Trump. If you don't, then I think you are more hesitant to vote for him.
Yeah, and on the same token, obviously we don't know who the vice presidential candidate is going to be on the Democratic side, but I mean, Kamala Harris, she's actually not too old, so that issue doesn't really arise. Yeah. But for whatever reason, if that issue happens, we need to start thinking in today's hectic life with the recent assassination attempts, are we going to have to start thinking as vice presidents as the possible next president?
Yeah.
That's going to be a larger emphasis now placed on when we have our elected officials being an older group, on being a more hated to an extent when it comes to these assassination attempts. Obviously, Crooks did not succeed, but there was a possibility that he could have. And so, had he done that, I mean, that world today would be a completely different world. We would be disorganized. I mean, I think if that had been successful, Joe Biden would have probably stayed in. If Trump was officially fully assassinated, I think Biden might have stayed in.
I don't think so. I think a lot of people are saying with Biden's diagnosis of COVID that is the thing that got him over. I don't think so. I think the DNC was planning this around the start of the primary season, and they saw RFK Jr. as a threat to the Democratic Party. Now, whatever you think of RFK Jr., you know he has been suppressed. He has been silenced. And so I think that they were like, how can we keep him out of getting the nomination? So they decided to keep Biden in and force him into his independent run. I think that's part of the reason they did it this late. Mm-hmm. I also think they wanted to see how he would do in a debate performance that debated on favored Biden, but I don't think Biden would have stayed in even if the assassin was successful in killing Trump, because I think the entire Republican Party would have been so unified that they would have been untouchable. Mm-hmm. And even all the independents would have been, they killed him. That's not okay. Let's vote for one of the other people running that's defending him.
Yeah.
That's my take on the whole DNC and Biden.
Yeah, and something that we'll look into in the future is Kamala Harris a placeholder until the actual DNC? The DNC happens about 77 days or so before the election happens. August 19th. And we will be giving coverage when it comes close to that event. Is Kamala Harris a placeholder for an incident like this? Is she waiting for a more official person to happen? What believes me to lead some doubt to that claim is that the finances of all those money being donated to the Biden-Harris campaign, they could be used on Harris, but they cannot be transferred to the next candidate, at least for the most part, with some exceptions. A lot more difficult when it comes to the
transferring
FEC.
The funds, yes.
And so something we'll look forward to is Kamala staying in? Is she really going to be in there for a while? And so with that, I want to wrap up with this. Kamala Harris responds to Vance's speech. It was compelling. It's a compelling story, but it's not the full story, Harris said. Frankly, what is very telling is what he did not talk about on the stage. He did not talk about Project 2025 and the 900-page blueprint for a second term. He did not talk about it because their plans are extreme and they are divisive. In the future, we'll take a look at Project 2025. Is Trump fully supporting it? No. Who is, though? And we're going to look forward to this and discussing this, and then also whether or not Kamala stays in. But thank you for listening, and thank you for watching. This is your Collegiate Defense. I'm Aidan C. Haggard.
And I'm James Laurence.
Thank you for watching. This is an official podcast of the American Conservative Youth Union.